Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to Empires SMP. I hope you guys are having a good day. Today, we step outside of the boundary of this map at least, or perhaps not the boundary of Pixandria, but we are going to the far reaches where I am planning to set up something else a little bit more technical and something that is kind of going to help us with the copper production that we now have going on in the under David, David 2.0. I think this is going to focus more on some other aspects of what I want for Pixandria though, because I'm planning to set up a drowned farm, but not the one you think I'm setting up. I have at this point found a double zombie spawner really close to my base, but there are a couple of complications that prevent me from immediately setting up one of those zombie reinforcement drowned farms, the Nembon powered drowned farm that I know a lot of people are using these days. Mainly the fact that we live in a desert, and so the snow golems that are used to create zombie reinforcements will die pretty much instantly in the desert heat, regardless of where they are underground. There are, thankfully, sections of river near to that zombie spawner which we could use to set up where the snow golems are and potentially not have them die immediately when they are created, but it's going to take a little bit of organizing. So I need to do a couple of drafts of that, now I know where it is, in a creative test world. But in the meantime, I've decided I want to work on a river biome drowned farm, the classic drowned farm, on account of it taking advantage of natural spawning mechanics. Natural spawns in a drowned farm are going to mean I can get some nautilus shells and tridents from it, and in particular I am interested in the nautilus shells because I have a ton of hearts of the sea. I've traded them from some of the other empires and I got a whole bunch myself in the early days of the server, but I haven't really had the time to do a whole lot of fishing. I don't really feel like building an AFK fish farm. I want to do something that's a little bit more impressive and seems more powerful than that. More advanced, if you like. So what we're going to do is set up this area over here where there is a loop in the river to be a river biome drowned farm, and we can hopefully take advantage of the amount of spawning spaces there will be around us if we stand in the middle of this island, or at least in the roughly the center coordinates of this island, but up in the sky, where we can AFK away from all of the dark caves and spawnable spaces in this area. We will hopefully end up creating a drowned farm of pretty magnificent proportions. Now for this farm we are going to need a lot of resources, because the way I want to do this is kind of based on a design I saw recently in Etho's Hermitcraft series. Etho has a drowned farm design that doesn't rely on there just being a curtain of flowing water in the sky. His drowned farm starts lower down at the river and uses soul sand bubble columns to propel the drowned up to the surface of the farm, and that can potentially be a really great way of getting them up into the sky and into the range of the player for a killing mechanism. It can also allow us to get a ton of drowned spawns and then funnel them into the Nether via Nether portals, which could lead to them evacuating the mob cap very quickly and then reloading the mob cap with a bunch more drowned. And if we build this a few blocks higher than ground level and still AFK at a decent point in the sky, we should find that a lot of drowned will rush up to meet us. But for that, of course, I will need a river biome's worth of soul sand, so we're going to have to go to the Nether, as well as figure out exactly what we want this whole thing to be built out of. My preference would be for glass, so you could kind of see the drowned coming up, but honestly, I don't know if that's going to be the most practical solution given how expensive glass is to produce and how annoying it is to work with the rest of the time. Oh, it turns out I haven't slept for a while as well, because there are now phantoms coming to attack me, so I think this is probably a pretty good sign that I should go and sleep, and then we should head to the Nether in search of some soul sand. Luckily, if you want a decent supply of soul sand, it's quite easy to get hold of these days. We have a ton of it here in the Nether that I'll just sweep up from this soul sand valley biome, and I even have soul speed on my boots, so this really shouldn't take very long at all. So with a handful of resources now collected, we have an outline of the river biome, and of course it looks kind of janky, and this is the unfortunate thing about building these farms to the outline of a smallish river biome. And it's so difficult to find a biome in which this can actually be an aesthetically pleasing farm, but I think we can do some stuff to at least make it fit in with the build style that I have going on right now, which is going to be a longer project than the farm itself. But what I've got right here is a couple of shulker boxes of resources with, first of all, some soul sand and, yes, some tinted glass. I didn't really specify that earlier, but we're going to be using tinted glass for the areas where we want the farm to be see-through. However, it took every amethyst crystal I could find to make this amount of tinted glass, and unless somebody is farming it in large amounts, which I expect they are, but there's not that many people online with me right now. I can't get hold of enough tinted glass to make the entire farm out of that. That would be a ludicrous amount that would take me a little while longer. So instead, I'm probably going to build it up from the ground with oak logs, birch, and sandstone until I get to a point where, higher up, I can use the tinted glass to expose the top of the farm, but keep the farm dark on the inside. So we're going to be using a mixture of solid blocks and transparent blocks that still block light. So this is going to be a bit of a long task, and after that we're going to be building up around the outside with every block I can get my hands on in order to surround this farm completely in darkness and make it a spawnable environment for the drowned. We're going to have to do that from here at about Y65 up to a height where we're not going to have any of the surrounding terrain loaded in, or at least we're going to need to AFK at a point where none of the surrounding terrain is loaded in. So that's going to be at about Y192 or thereabouts. And once again, because I'm going to need to say this several times so that people understand, we are doing this for the equipment that drowned will naturally spawn with, which does not happen when you convert drowned from zombies in a zombie spawner. They do not spawn with tridents or nautilus shells if they are converted from zombies. And so we are trying our best here to get hold of the tridents and nautilus shells before we worry about extra drops like copper. So I hope that makes a bit of sense to you. Anyway, I'm going to finish doing the outline of the farm, filling in all of this outline with soul sand, and then hopefully from there we can go to a time lapse and we'll start building up the walls of our drowned farm. Hey folks, welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed the time lapse. So far we have a decent chunk of the farm built out. And you might be wondering why I've stopped here and why it's not going all the way up to the AFK point. And I realized part of the way through this that what we really just need is a tank for the drowned to spawn in, and then if we can get some sort of mechanism, some sort of water flow into the center, we can basically combine the drowned into one single chute that just heads up to the AFK point, or as it may be, the point where we put them in the Nether to get them out of the mob cap. And so I decided to leave it at this, the footprint of the river biome, and hopefully we'll just be able to put a lid on this and it's enough room for all the drowned to spawn. Now, I discovered something that I wasn't really aware of whilst I was building out the bottom half of this farm and putting in all of the kelp blocks, and it has to do with the way kelp creates water sources, which is actually going to be really useful to those of you who want to build farms like this, or basically any kind of large area of water where you're using kelp to propagate water sources. Now, of course, as you put the kelp in, you're probably going to notice a little bit of this happening, but the kelp, as it creates water sources, is going to combine with other water sources that are down here, and just like when you're combining two buckets of water on a corner, they will actually create a water source right there, because the kelp plant itself is turning those two blocks there into water sources, which is making a third water source right there, which means we can actually go around just filling the sides of this and immediately get levitated up in a bubble column, thanks to the fact that the kelp is making water sources over there and it's spreading them across here. Furthermore, what this means is when it comes to filling the entire height of this area with water sources, all we should need to do is either wait for the kelp to grow, or probably come down here and artificially grow it with bone meal, and it will end up filling the entire height of this thing, just having placed kelp around the edges. You don't need to worry about doing every single block like this with kelp. In fact, that's probably just going to take even more time and be completely unnecessary, because the kelp around the sides is doing all the work for you. Which is good for me, because I don't really have that much bone meal. I don't have an ally with a skeleton farm, and so we're probably just going to grab a few of these kelp plants around the sides and grow them sort of strategically. And then as the kelp plant grows up here, as we grow a kelp plant adjacent to that, it will also fill in this water source all the way to the top. And once it does that for every water source in that row, we can start to spread it all the way along here, and it will be doing it for every water source along this section, and then we can spread the water to the rest of the tank. And that's what we like to see, the dancing disco of kelp on the surface. This whole section with just a few pieces of bone meal is now entirely levitating anything that goes into here. In fact, I think there isn't a single spot where we could get down into the water at this point. In some areas like this, we can even alternate, because we know that water sources will fill in the spot in the center. So now if I break that, this column is complete as well. And even if I get low on bone meal, all I need to do is grow these kelp plants all the way to the surface manually, and it should make this process a breeze. Unfortunately, one thing it doesn't really like is the frame rate. I'm generating a lot of particles here, and so I'll probably do the rest of this part off camera, and I'll come back to you folks when we're ready to put a lid on the farm and sort out how we're going to get the drowned into the central chute. Hello, it's me again. I have found an unexpected side effect of making this farm out of bubble columns, and it's that when a drowned throws a trident at you and misses, the trident can still be caught by the bubble column, and as it happens, it remains persistent if it is juggled like this, because it never lands, and it has to be attached to a solid block in order to despawn. You've probably seen a fair amount of this in those incredible lightning-producing trident machines, using channeling tridents and a lightning rod, but that one back there has been going for over 20 minutes now as I complete the rest of this farm, and it's only taken me that long because I keep stopping to see if it's done anything. I think the only thing I may be able to do about these, and I don't think tridents build momentum in the same way fall damage does, so I think the only thing I can do about this is come over here and be hit by it, except the trident doesn't seem to want to hit me, because I'm also bouncing in the same bubble column that it is, and I have no real way of getting underneath it because the bubble column is so forceful. I'm going to try and maybe launch myself downwards with enough velocity that I can get under the trident, but it's very difficult to do. And as far as I can tell, these tridents are just going to be persistent until they hit something. So I might have to put a block underneath them in a minute, but it seems like the ones that are poking out of here, I was very scared going through that just in case they all hit me at once and I died. but I think they are just there. For the time being, they just exist in this space, and I do not know what will happen to them if they stay there permanently. Well, I've come up here at night to give the farm a bit of a test, at least to make sure that we are on the right track, and I gotta say, it looks like we are. We're up at Y195 right now, so as little as possible is spawning on the ground below, although we're definitely getting some mobs spawning on some of the areas of the farm. I did lay out this platform to see if we could let the water out from the sides, but of course, we got water sources combining as soon as it turned a corner. It wasn't really going to work super well. There might be some options there, but what I'm thinking we will end up doing is going with the method I used for the bubble columns in the Guardian farm on the Minecraft Survival Guide, where there'll just be a row of fence gates above this and then water flowing over that, taking it down to a kind of more central area here where hopefully we can control the flows of water with a little bit more precision. But it looks like we are on the right lines. We have a ton of drowned surfacing from the bubble columns below, and it looks like our river biome is going to be fairly productive, as long as I can make sure the other mobs aren't going to spawn around here with some well-placed slabs. There are a few more trident slinging guys down there. We might even hopefully see a few carrying nautilus shells as well. Overall, I think this is working out very, very well. Well, it's now a lot of time later, and we have a functional river biome drowned farm with a couple of minor tweaks still to be made. But I needed to get this episode out. It's already a little bit late because this farm has been kicking my butt. Because I decided instead of using fence gates, I would use scaffolding over the top of the water. I tried this out in a creative test world, and it actually has a few advantages. First of all, the fact that you can place a bunch of scaffolding from the edges of blocks outwards meant that it was a little bit less tricky than placing fence gates. Also, the bubble columns can go up right underneath the scaffolding, and as you can see, that brings a bunch of drowned to the surface almost immediately, where they can glide over here, and instead of pathfinding towards turtle eggs or something where their AI would have to kick in, they can just be carried over here by the water streams. And you'll notice that this farm is even spawning drowned during the day, thanks to the fact that water will occlude some of the light coming from the surface, meaning that lower down in the farm, with the amount of height it has, we're still getting dark areas where the drowned can spawn. I am the only one on the server right now, otherwise this farm would not be getting the rates of spawning that it has. But up here in the sky, we are seeing a ton of the drowned making their way up in the bubble column I've positioned in the center here. There are unfortunately still a few spaces in the farm where the drowned get stalled, and that is because of water sources just not flowing where they should do. There are a couple of areas where water sources have collected inside the scaffolding, and that means that some of the water has started to flow backwards. But in most cases, because of how high up we are, those drowned will end up despawning eventually, so it's not going to impact the rates of the farm for long. And as you can see, we have a lot of drowned up here waiting to kill. Also at night, this farm becomes, of course, more productive, but also a little bit more unpredictable because the drowned have different AI at night. They actually start to notice and pathfind towards the player at night in ways that they don't during the day unless the player is standing in water, which means this farm does change a little bit at night, and I do want to put a roof over this farm so it ends up spawning way more drowned during the day. And that's where the tinted glass is going to come in. I am probably going to cover the entire thing over the top, at least, with tinted glass to ensure maximum spawn rates. But I wanted to make sure I could record a little bit more of this video for you now because I'm very, very low on fireworks and food. So I'm having to eat a bit of rotten flesh as I stand here at the farm. I'm also having to reposition some of this kill area here because I've built this column of glass panes all the way up here so that the drowned have an easier time getting up there from the single soul sand column in the center. But what that means is at the back of this area, you can kind of see it. There are a bunch of drowned congregating at the back, and while I've got soul sand and hoppers running towards a chest there are some drowned that end up standing at the back of this area, and right now they're just picking up that trident over and over again, but it sometimes ends up with the drowned standing back there, and some of their drops will fall through. You can see it happen just there with a drowned head. Some of the drops will fall through the gaps in those glass panes and be picked up by some of the drowned at the bottom of the column that remain persistent. So I'm probably going to bring this entire thing one block further forward, which is going to take a little bit more finagling off camera, but as you can see, this farm is already pretty productive. I was getting some issues at night with reinforcement zombies, so a couple of them ended up spawning on this platform and inside the farm itself, which is why there's a carrot in here to begin with. But we have so many drowned heads right now. We have a decent handful of copper ingots, actually, more than I was expecting, thanks to those new 1.17.1 drop rates. We have 4 tridents just from this last little session. There weren't actually any tridents in here until I started farming them just now. And we have a ton of rotten flesh that I could trade with clerics. Most importantly for me right now, we have almost enough nautilus shells to get a full conduit. And hopefully, once I get done farming a few more of these guys, we should have enough nautilus shells to create all of the conduits that I wanted. We are really going to have to do something about this drop area, though, because, yep, that drowned head is just spinning on the hitbox of the glass pane at the back and unable to go anywhere. Until it eventually gets picked up by another drowned coming up the pipe. But that's a pretty good farm, as far as I'm concerned. There are still a couple of issues to work out here and there, a couple of areas where there are holes that I had to patch up with fence gates anyway, but I think overall this farm is working the way I wanted it to. I just need to get sweeping edge on my sword so I have a slightly easier time killing the drowned in large quantities, and I think this would also make a semi-decent XP farm as well, considering I don't really have a super reliable mob farm way of getting XP right now. But yeah, all of these dead areas where the water is flowing backwards needs a solution, and I think it's probably going to be filling the areas there with fence gates again. For the best look at how this farm is going to produce drowned, though, we have to see it at nighttime, because honestly, this is where the rates start to kick in. You can already see a bunch more drowned traveling up the tube here, and once we start to see a few more of these drowned on the surface despawning, there are still a couple of areas, weirdly, where we're getting some mobs on the surface, so I might have to flatten out some more of the terrain. But just looking at the amount of drowned that are still down there, even though a couple of them are trapped, at night this farm is something else, and once we get a roof over this entire thing, we will see these kind of rates happening at all hours of the day. But with the sun rising over there, let's take a look in the chest, and this is what we got from the farm in about one Minecraft day. So that's about 20 minutes worth of time spent at the farm. We almost have a full stack of copper ingots, which is pretty good. But again, 9 nautilus shells, 5 tridents, and I'm thinking what I'm going to do is get myself a riptide trident to get around instead of using the fireworks. I have a few solutions in mind for the drowned getting stuck in the farm, but at least right now they should despawn because of distance, and the farm is still producing a whole bunch of mobs that make their way up here to the killing area. And the whole thing needs finishing off and dressing up a little bit, because right now it does look a little ugly from ground level, but I almost don't want to leave. Now that I only have 1 firework left, I might have to spend a bit of time farming gunpowder from creepers in the desert, but I have plans for that as well, so we'll have to see how things go. But for now, from this weird giraffe-like thing in the sky, I'm going to call it a day for this episode. Thank you so much for watching Empires SMP. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.